What's up? Welcome back to Barton and Bud. I'm Barton Simmons along with Bud Elliott. It is Sunday evening, as it always is when we record this pod. You're probably listening to it Monday morning or sometime thereafter, and we are the dust is settled on the Big Ten's first weekend of college football, and obviously there's a lot of football over the weekend, Bud, but the most important football is the Big Ten football, because this was our first opportunity to shake hands and meet this new crop of folks coming to our party, our college football party. And so, you know what, we're gonna have some fun with that, and we'll talk about some of the other games and some of our other impressions around the country where maybe our opinions have changed based on the weekend's results. But Bud, I think the most pressing order of business is to dig into the first impressions of new kids at the party.
I'm there with you. I'm down to talk about all these teams except Iowa, Purdue. I didn't watch that game. I really don't have any new opinions about that game, and I judge them from the result there. They're probably both just solid, middle of the West or middle of the pack West teams. I would think, but I kind of want to start up front with Nebraska, man. Like, I thought Nebraska played a style against Ohio State that never really, I never thought they were actually really in the game to win the game, because they were playing super conservative on defense and they weren't allowing the huge explosive play to the Buckeyes. And I think Nebraska lacks defensive speed, so they're probably smart to play a lot of umbrella stuff and allow underneath throws and whatnot. But like, their offensive line blocked pretty well. I don't know if that's Ohio State defensive line not being quite as good as normal, but I got to tell you, man, I'm fairly confident, even with this bear of a schedule, that Nebraska has a good shot to get to 4-4. I think Scott Frost will show improvement as far as the quality of his team this year. They're going to get scored upon by some folks, but they're going to be able to block, give Adrian Martinez time, and put some points up on people. So that's kind of where I want to start there. Like, Nebraska's offense, check the box for me. I know they only scored 17 points, so
it's really interesting. Like, yeah, they got beat 52-17. That's a pretty ridiculous number, and yet everyone seems to be in agreement with you coming out of that game feeling encouraged by Nebraska. I don't know what that says about Ohio State, that you can lose 52-17 and still be someone that can present some positive attributes from the game. Like, I mean, I kind of agree with you. I do think that there's reason for optimism, but I don't think that there's reason for confidence yet. And look, I thought that they seemed like they defended the run pretty well, at least early in the game. I thought they, up front, they seemed like they were pretty good. And then as the game progressed and went along, it started to snowball a little bit and overwhelm them a little bit, and it caught up to them. And so I guess with Nebraska, it's just sort of handcuffed with this sort of how good is Ohio State, because look, I mean, this is sort of a similar score to Alabama, Missouri, and Missouri's ended up being pretty good. And so it's just a tricky one to evaluate to me, but yes, maybe it's just the eye test. But to me, I came away feeling better about Nebraska than I thought I would as well.
And keep in mind, of course, that Nebraska is going to get back Omar Manning, right? Who wasn't playing for them.
You hope so. What was his? Did I missed the reason he was out? Do we know?
No, I don't know, but like in reading the beat writer tweets, basically it was like they were still on pins and needles as to whether he was going to go in this game. And my thought is, like, if the beat guys are not sure if he's going to play in the game, there's a pretty good chance he'll be back at some point. You know what I mean? It's not like some sort of, thing where, hey, he's probably done for the year or something like that. So I'm encouraged by reading those, at least.
That's an important one, because those who aren't familiar with Omar Manning, he was, I can't remember where he was, a 4-star, but I can't remember where we had him ranked as, but he may well be the best junior college wide receiver coming out of the class last year.
Yeah.
Kind of a freak body type, athletic dude that's could absolutely add a jolt to the passing game there for Nebraska pretty quickly if he can get healthy and be full speed.
So natural transition here. You said, hey, like we're encouraged by Nebraska and they only scored 17 points. Maybe that's just because of how we feel about Ohio State. And I wasn't disappointed in Ohio State. I was encouraged by a lot of things Ohio State did. I thought that one of the reasons for the lack of explosive plays that Ohio State had was just sort of the style of coverage that Nebraska was playing. I think Nebraska, I don't really think Nebraska was playing to win this game. I think they were playing not to get blown out, to be honest. I mean, just based on how they were playing it, they weren't playing super fast. They were letting that clock go. This game almost hit the under despite both offenses moving the ball, fairly okay. Um, but like Ohio State didn't put this game into true garbage time by Bill Connolly's definition for quite a while. It wasn't like they got a ton of their backups in. Now, granted, they probably wanted to get their starters a decent number of reps because it's the first game of the year and they've had this weird COVID offseason. But I do think it says something about Ohio State that I thought they looked fine, good, and won by 35 points over a Nebraska team that I think is decent. I mean, Justin Fields, super efficient. There's not a lot not to like. Like, do you have any lingering questions about this Ohio State team? I think I really only have, maybe one.
Well, so look, I mean, there's a very clear top tier in college football right now. It's Alabama and Clemson. I think we expected Ohio State to be within that tier. This to me was a game that showed it is within that tier because even Alabama and Clemson are imperfect. They aren't totally like there's whatever you want to like, whether it's Alabama's defense, whether it's Clemson's outside receivers, or whether it's Clemson's week in, week out focus, messing around with a Syracuse or whatever you want to say. Like, these are not teams that just look unbeatable by the others within that top tier. And so I'm going to be fine with saying Ohio State is what we thought. They are in this top tier. They don't look perfect. The run game wasn't outstanding early on. Like the defense is probably going to take a little time to find itself as the season progresses. But the one factor, the one element of this Ohio State team that really I think everything else hinges on was, to me, Justin Fields and his step forward. And he didn't need to take a step forward. He was good last year. He was great last year. He was awesome. But I think a step forward from Justin Fields was going to make this Ohio State team really that much more of a championship favorite, national championship favorite. And man, it looked like Justin Fields version 2.0. It looked like Justin Fields exclamation point. Like, it looked really good. And he had one incompletion. That one incompletion was in the end zone on a pass that was a tough catch, but should have been caught, would have been a touchdown. I think he had maybe one or two other passes over the course of the day that fell incomplete that were wiped out because of penalty. But as I remember, even those were catchable balls. He was about as good as it gets. And that is really all that matters. Like, none of the other stuff, any of the other nitpicking doesn't really matter. A Justin Fields like that erases a lot and is someone that can just win. So I think that, and the fact that he does have the receivers that we talked about, not to belabor the receiver point, but he's got studs at receiver, Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson in particular, but Jackson Smith-Njigba and Julian Fleming and those guys are going to come along as well, and they're only going to get better on the perimeter.
Jackson specifically there is the guy who, like, people who have real heat inside that program seem to be really high on. Like, that's a guy I think helps them, of that class they just signed, helps them like this year. My only real lingering question with them on the other side of the ball, like, I don't know if that defensive line is what it is last year. In fact, I know it's probably not what it was last year, but how big is the drop off there to this defensive line, and will it really matter in the Big Ten? I'm not so sure it will. I guess if there is a team that might be able to challenge them. Probably need to go up look at Ann Arbor just based on one weekend. They came out, and I'm not completely sold, but they impressed me, man. Like they checked off some boxes that I thought needed to be checked, and as much as you can in one game, kind of answer some of the doubts that I have.
No, I mean, Michigan was awesome. Michigan was fun. They looked energetic. They looked like they wanted to be out there. Their defense was flying around. Joe Milton looked, I mean, good. I mean, I think good is a fair statement here. And the skill players on offense were collectively really good. It was a bunch of guys touching the ball at receiver. It was several running backs that were making big plays. The offense looked very well oiled and comfortable. And I think the defense was as much of a storyline as the offense. The offense is going to get a lot of headlines, and it should. But the defense was, I guess we just come to expect that out of the defense. Now they're always capable of having a letdown, but I mean they can turn you over. They can put you behind the chains. I mean, they're going to make some plays, and the defensive line looked really good. And Cam McGrone, I love at linebacker, and I just think Michael Barrett was awesome. So I mean, there's
Quiddy Pay was
Kwity
nasty up
Paye.
front.
There's just man, there's a lot of dudes on that team that are legit. And so yeah, I think first weekend, I would agree with you. Like if I had to gun to head, who can beat Ohio State? The only team that looked like they had that kind of juice is Michigan.
They have a lot of names on there who I saw as a recruit, who you saw as a recruit, who we maybe hadn't heard of quite or heard from quite as much over the last couple of years, who in that game really popped for me. And I said, oh, okay, like there's that guy. I remember he had this kind of talent. Now he's playing to this level. So Michigan seems to be doing a good job of developing those guys and getting them ready. I liked that a large percentage of the plays either like were Milton running the ball or some type of like Milton's mobility was a prime feature of the play. The defense had to account for his legs on every play. And we have, I think, twice on this podcast discussed Joe Milton. I know we had a mailbag question about him maybe a month ago. And I was like, look, he's really, really huge. I mean, he's like Cam Newton size. I've been next to him and Cam Newton on the same field before. I'm like, that's pretty much a similarly sized dude right there. He's got a cannon for an arm. And Michigan seems to have really leaned into this, and they're gonna run some of the spread option type stuff with him. I think that this accomplishes a couple things. Number one, running the ball, playing defense is something they can do. Number two, I'm not really in love necessarily with the receivers yet, but I mean they had a couple nice plays in that game. I'll give them credit for that. I know you recently wrote about that. Man, I got to tell you, like making this offense, making the defense account for his legs on every play is really big. And yet, I bet Michigan in this game pretty close up to game time. Once I saw the report that confirmed some of the rumors about the guys being out from Minnesota, and I do think that we need to mention that, like the field position that Michigan had, I believe that they started on Minnesota's side of the field 4 of their first 7 drives in this game. Minnesota was missing their kicker, punter, kickoff specialist, starting linebacker, starting right tackle, starting right guard, and a couple other dudes. The broadcast said that Minnesota would not say why they were out, but the assumption there from the broadcast crew, and they said it was an informed assumption, the ABC crew did, was that it was COVID-related stuff, meaning that eventually they would probably get those guys back. Although with the Big Ten rules, who knows? I do wonder, like, are we overreacting to this based on Minnesota special teams being a total disaster and also missing some pretty key players there on both sides of the ball? Like Michigan looked like the best team other than Ohio State this weekend to me, but I'm also not totally sure what they were going up against.
I think that's fair. I think that's important to remember. I think, I mean, Minnesota, I don't know. Like, I mean, Tanner Morgan didn't look like the best we've seen Tanner Morgan. The specialists were pretty bad. And yeah, I mean, there was never a point in that game where specialists aside, Michigan didn't look like the better team, right?
Right. Yeah.
So I think I'm going to trust the Michigan. Look, I don't know. I don't know whether Michigan is on Ohio State's sort of level. I don't know if they're a worthy combatant there, but I do, with the exception of maybe Wisconsin. I don't know. I don't know if there's other teams I'm tempted to throw in there, but I won't. Yeah, I think I do think Michigan probably looked. I still think they looked the best from the weekend. Maybe it's the sex appeal of the big plays and the big sacks and that kind of stuff that caught my attention as average Joe fan guy. But I think they looked the best, like the best non-Ohio State team the weekend.
I'm going to largely withhold judgment on Minnesota. I feel like because of the guys who were out, and also with respect to Michigan's defense is kind of one of these ultimate, like to steal a Bill Connolly phrase here, covariance defenses. They are really good at beating up on the guys who they're more talented than. When they face an offense that has stud receivers and can really chuck it around, as you've seen what Ohio State has done to them recently and a couple other times, they are liable to give up 50 or 60. So does this change my opinion of what this defense can do against Ohio State? Not at all. Just reserving judgment on that as well for now. You did mention Wisconsin.
All right, let's see. Wisconsin, is that our best case for a contender beyond Michigan?
I think so. I don't want this to sound bad, but I was extremely impressed by Graham Mertz. I think you and I have both been fairly optimistic / hopeful about Mertz, given his talent level coming out. He was like the first very talented quarterback that Wisconsin signed. And yet, man, I got to tell you, like, I think he only had 8 passes thrown at receivers. Over half of those on the day were screens. It seemed like it was just throwing the ball a lot to the backs and tight ends, which, you know, is very effective in beating Illinois. But like, who's the replacement for Quintez Cephas? Who's the replacement for Jonathan Taylor on this team? Like, if you're telling me that Wisconsin's going to take a step to seriously contend, like, do you think this Wisconsin team is better than last year's Wisconsin team? Because, like, so far, I don't, man. Like, they might have better quarterback play, but I don't think they have better skill position play. And the defense is going to be really good again.
Yeah, I think it's a fair question. Kendrick Pryor, Danny Davis. I mean, those guys were, I thought, impressive when they flashed, but I don't know that I'm confident in them becoming threatening elite Big Ten wide receivers. So I think that's a fair splash of cold water. I do think, though, that look, the other issue here is that Graham Mertz now has tested positive for COVID.
Right.
And I guess as we record this, we don't know where things stand, and perhaps he has another negative test coming his way, and maybe he's back. But if he's out for 21 days, then we almost just have to like throw out our takeaways, because the biggest takeaway was the revelation of Graham Mertz, who was 20-21 with 5 touchdowns. And it wasn't, kind of to your point, like, it wasn't as if Graham Mertz was just, you know, doing just crazy freakish stuff at the quarterback position. It was just, he was very, very confident, very on time, accurate, and just allowed the offense to really rip it and like be all it can be. Like, it didn't have to rely on the run game. It could be balanced. It could, you know, and so if Graham Mertz is out and we're down to the 3rd string quarterback, Chase Wolf, is that right?
Yep.
Then I don't know. Like, I feel like we have to just divert this until next weekend and then see how things look with Chase Wolf at quarterback. So I don't know. I think the defense was everything I expected it to be. I will say this. Illinois I was more disappointed with Illinois than I was impressed with Wisconsin. And that is not meant to take anything away from Wisconsin. They were great. I just expected them to be really good defensively. but that Illinois wasn't better offensively, and I think specifically throwing the ball, like Brandon Peters didn't really look that good. Just didn't. And I've been a Brandon Peters optimist for a while
Yeah,
since his days back in Michigan. He is just it's just the next step just had never come. And I don't know why it is, but I think there is sort of a low ceiling on this team at the quarterback position, because when Isaiah Williams was in, it wasn't it wasn't any it was worse throwing it, and it wasn't all that much more threatening running it. So like there were actually times when the Illinois defense looked pretty good. I think it was, I mean, when you're possessing the football 16 minutes in a game, that's tough on a defense.
that's going to be problematic. I totally agree with you, man. I was going into this game expecting Illinois' defensive line to get mauled by Wisconsin. And look, Wisconsin largely did what they wanted, but I didn't see the enormous gaping holes that I thought you would see against a defensive line that lost everybody, like literally everybody from last year. So the JUCO and transfer guys that Illinois brought in, I thought on the defensive line acquitted themselves pretty nicely. Or maybe Wisconsin's not as good up front as they normally are, but I'm going to assume Wisconsin's pretty damn good up front. So I want to give credit to Illinois' defensive line there. Illinois' passing game, man, like Imitor Bebe was the primary target. None of the other receivers got like any real passing game action of note. And the three best plays for Illinois on offense were quarterback scramble and two zone reads. And I felt like Wisconsin was like, oh, wait a second, Peters can run? Well, we'll go ahead and shut this down henceforth, and then you'll get nothing else. But like, they're like, hey, do that again. I don't think you can do that again. He's like, all right, well, literally the next play, he does it again. And then they said, okay, well, we're going to be done with this.
Sack adjusted yards per rush for Wisconsin was 3.8 yards per carry. So, I mean, I don't know whether we should be, is that more negative on Wisconsin or positive on Illinois? But either way, it is a little bit of a number. In a 45-7 win for Wisconsin, where you just sort of look at it and you scratch your head and be like, all right, what do we take from that?
So the backs for Wisconsin, I guess that was kind of my initial thought. Like they didn't do much more than what was blocked. And I thought that was especially disappointing from them. And this is like you said, almost a 40-point win here in which Illinois' offense didn't score. But like Wisconsin's backs didn't give me much more than what was blocked. And keep in mind that Illinois' best linebacker went off very early in the game with an injury. So
I'll tell you what, though, his backup came in and balled out.
He was all over the place.
What was my man's name? Tariq Barnes. He had 11 tackles, a sack, 1.5 tackles for loss, 7 solo tackles, a fumble recovery that he picked up and ran for 39 yards. That dude was getting after it. And he
Shout out
caused that
Tariq
fumble.
Barnes.
Yeah.
There you go.
So, there you go. Congrats, Tariq Barnes, for coming in and playing well. But that was you needed some help from your boys on the other side of the ball.
Well, do you think Northwestern fans are going to need to work on their conditioning, like in getting up? I guess they're not really, at the field because the Big Ten has no fans, but they can't just totally ignore one side of the ball and go make a 12-step based on a YouTube video cocktail and get back in time to watch their defense. Like now Northwestern actually they have an offense that you have to sit and watch, and I know Mike Pajakian is their new OC, man. They look exactly like Boston College looked the last couple of years. Like they're going to be up tempo. They're going to run the ball a lot. They're going to try to create some explosive runs. They're not going to use a whole lot of like short passes. They're going to try to go deep when they can, throw off play action. And shit, it looked great. Like I know it's Maryland, but like Northwestern's offense is, I don't want to go overboard here and have to eat my words, competent, functional, refreshing.
Yes. Yeah, that it might be better than those things, but we can be confident it is those things. And was it Mick McCall? Is that who their OC was before? And the irony of Mick McCall's tenure as the offensive coordinator at Northwestern is even dating back to his days at, I want to say it was like Bowling Green before Northwestern. um, as a quarterback coach and offensive coordinator, he has had an NFL quarterback almost his entire career. Like almost his entire career. A lot of them are guys that have, started for multiple seasons, fifth-year seniors, like whatever. But very few seasons in his career has he not had an NFL quarterback. And so you wonder, all right, well, is he really good at evaluating and developing quarterbacks, or is he really good at squandering good quarterback talent? Because Northwestern has been really bad. I don't know. You sort of excuse it because, it's defensive team and they're just trying to win the way they win and they're going to grind it out and win close, and Michigan State it and, Wisconsin it. And, teams have tried to take this style. But I think this year will be a nice little reveal of, what, Northwestern doesn't have to be like that. Mike Bajakian, as you mentioned, he's actually going to be a guy that's willing to push pace, push some tempo from time to time. They had 83 plays to Maryland's 49 on Saturday. Peyton Ramsey, their transfer quarterback, is a solid quarterback, played a solid game, and they had a pretty good little run action on the day. Was it who was their leading rusher? I'm blanking on the
I forgot. He was all over the place.
Drake Anderson. He had 10 carries for 103 yards. But they gave the ball to a bunch of other dudes. And I think that this is going to be a team that can beat somebody. Like, I really think this is a team that can beat somebody.
I think Northwestern, Barton, they could legitimately go 5-3. Like, you were on this, and
that's my prediction. I have predicted them 5-3. And hey, this was Maryland's. So who knows? Maybe this is going to be as good as it gets the rest of the year. But I think this is a good start.
We specifically me were chastised for not talking enough Maryland on the last podcast. So let's talk some Maryland, baby. All right. Okay. 3 points. Maryland, thank you for doing absolutely nothing to help me hit my over wager in this game. I played this thing over live. Once I saw that the Wildcats were indeed going to push pace. Maryland doesn't look any better than they looked last year. They might look worse. If they opted out in the season right now just as a team, I really couldn't blame them. They have lost, I believe, 8 consecutive games. I think I saw the stat on Twitter, by an average of 32 points. They're not competitive in any of their games. And if not for Kansas, I'm pretty sure Maryland would be the worst team in the Power 5. Kansas is a different beast because Kansas only has 30 scholarship players on defense right now. And even Kansas, they're still Kansas level guys. This is embarrassing. Like there's, you got players like waving their arms at each other, like they don't know what's going on. The team just doesn't look like doesn't look coached at all.
I think the other thing that's just really discouraging for if you're Maryland is there was a hope. I wouldn't even say it was an expectation, but there was a hope that this long, dark winter without quarterback, or with all these quarterback injuries or whatever it is, maybe it's come to an end with Taulia Tagovailoa. And that doesn't necessarily have to mean that Taulia Tagovailoa is going to be an NFL quarterback, but just, all right, well, hey, maybe there's a consistent, accurate quarterback under center now. And it just was not a pretty day for Taulia. 14 of 25, 94 yards, 3 touchdowns. 3 interceptions. 2 of those interceptions were bad decisions. And Lance Legendre actually was in garbage time, was 4 of 4 for 49 yards. And so I don't know, maybe they need to give him a go, but there is no one should have, and I don't think many people did expect some sort of Tua-esque talent. But no one really knew either, for sure. I mean, Taulia had a nice little spring game a couple years ago at Alabama. He's, I assume, Mike Locksley didn't bring him there. I mean, he has as much inside info on Talia as anybody. You would have thought he knew what he was getting, and they seemed to have brought him in to start, and it just didn't click week one. We'll see if it gets better, but that was, if that's who he is, that's a big disappointment for this team. Though, hey, the good news is Lance Legendre is a kind of an interesting, intriguing backup that may just be better anyways.
And also, we should note, look, this is a COVID year. It doesn't mean we're necessarily going to asterisk the national champion, but I think we are going to be absolutely willing to excuse a lot of stuff that goes on in this year, especially stuff that goes on that isn't really good. There's a lot of different, teams and players and families that are coming from very different circumstances right now about how this has been handled and developed. And Maryland looks absolutely terrible and does not, like, they're showing no signs of improvement on the field. But
I'm trying to think, is there, so you said potentially the worst team in Power 5, Kansas.
Other than
Agreed.
Kansas.
Other than Kansas, I'm trying to think, is that
Vanderbilt?
Contenders, Vanderbilt, really anyone in the ACC? Probably not.
No, I wouldn't say anybody in the ACC yet. I mean, I guess Syracuse over the weekend probably DQs them from that.
They beat Duke or somebody anyways earlier this year, so that gets them out.
They beat Georgia Tech. Yeah,
that's who they beat. Oh yeah, there you go.
Now look, I will say Rutgers is in the conversation.
You're not sold, huh? You're not sold on the big W.
I just don't know if 7 turnovers received per game is sustainable. We'll see. We'll see. Michigan State also looked very sketchy, and if they're going to run the ball like 50 times for 71 yards, then they are like, that's just, I know Rocky Lombardi's not a good passer at all, but like,
man, when is it? Remember when they used to be able to run the ball?
Oh my God.
When it's been, it feels like it's been forever since Michigan State's been decent at running the football. It's been at least like, I don't know. It feels like we're on 3 years at least where they just can't run the ball. Maybe
I got to tell you, man,
than that.
Like, this is a money make opportunity. I really think, like, it may take a week or, remember how we identified the fact that you can probably make good money betting against Kansas for about another week or two before Vegas really caught up. Mel Tucker unders, Michigan State team total unders, like him and Dave Aranda, not to totally foray into the Big 12 stuff here, but like, if you're not betting unders, Michigan State and Baylor right now, until these lines adjust, and Baylor's probably going to adjust a little bit pretty soon, then you're missing out. Because the way these guys manage games is they manage games like coordinators. They're not head coaches yet. I mean, I know Mel Tucker's been a head coach now at Colorado, but like, that was incredible wasting of plays, like that many run plays when you have Lombardi, who's not any good, but he's a lot more efficient than just handing the ball off and getting 1.4 yards a carry or whatever they got. That was ridiculous.
Yes, there's a big party being thrown for Rutgers right now, and deservedly so. Like, enjoy it. You should. This is awesome for that program to get off the mat after 21 straight Big Ten losses and get a win. But you do look up at the end of this game, and you're right, like seven takeaways. You could almost call them 7 giveaways from Michigan State, more so. I mean, a couple of those were gift wrapped.
5 fumbles. I mean, only 2 picks, so it has to be 5 fumbles, right?
Yeah. And 3.9 yards per play from Rutgers on offense. They had scoring drives. I don't have it pulled up right now, and I don't want to waste too much time digging into it, but they had I want to say 3 or 4 scoring drives that were where they were 20 yards or less, 25 yards or less or something.
Yeah.
So, hey, they credit them. They won. They had average field position on the 45-yard line. It's kind of the day it was.
By the way, that is enormous. Like, I don't know if all y'all out there listening don't know what average field position is. Like, the 45 is huge. I mean, that's a, like, how many drives do we have in this game? So average field position for Michigan State was the 34. So they had about 11-yard differential per drive, and they had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
16 drives.
What's 16 times 11? 176. Like that's a 176 yard edge in average starting field position. That's 17 first downs. Like that's a really big deal.
Yeah.
All right. So maybe Rutgers was a little lucky to win the game. I've already pledged to not judge Michigan State this year. They got such a late start. It's really not very fair. And I think D'Antonio held on way too long there and left Mel Tucker kind of a steaming pile. So let's just go ahead and give them a couple of years. Congrats to Rutgers on their win. But from a team that was pretty lucky to win the game to a team that was incredibly unlucky as far as, based on how they moved the ball and how they stopped the opponent from moving the ball, incredibly unlucky to lose. Penn State had a 95% post-game win expectancy, and that's based on basically like field position, turnovers, how you move the ball, how you stop the opponent from moving the ball, red zone efficiency, all this kind of stuff. 95% post-game, not pre-game, post-game, and they lose. That doesn't happen very often. Like we get a couple of those a year, 2 or 3 games a year. You get a team with a 5%er pulling out the win. The win, like the result of the game doesn't change my opinion of Penn State all that much. But like the way the game was played, it makes me think that the ceiling for this Penn State team is lower, man. Because like I didn't see the explosion on offense. I also don't really love how the schedule sets up for Penn State now because they have Ohio State coming to town this weekend, which is not terribly convenient for them, given the fact the offense doesn't look like it's all put together. And Sean Clifford is still Sean Clifford.
At best.
Yeah.
Like he doesn't look, to start the year, he doesn't look like even like a really good Sean Clifford. He looks like just an okay Sean Clifford. Now, that said, I mean, look, his legs became a real factor in that game as it wore on, and he was really effective with his athleticism, and that can't be ignored by a couple of bad throws. But yes, I think this is still the guy that we sort of thought he was. The 2 things that are encouraging about Penn State: one, the defense was awesome. Before the last drive of the game, and I guess I could pull up the stats specifically. Let me see. So Indiana finished with 211 yards of total offense. All right. Their last drive, Indiana they had a 75-yard drive, and then they had 25 yards in overtime. So do the math there. What is that? 111 yards of total offense prior to the last drive of regulation. That's what Penn State's defense was able to accomplish.
Did you see did you read off their drives, like their drive length for Indiana pre-overtime?
I've got it pulled up. I can. -7 yards, three plays 2 yards, 9 plays 22, 6 plays 62, 2 plays 4, 2 plays -1, halftime, 6 plays 13, 1 plays 0, 9 plays 44, 3 plays 4, 3 plays 6, 4 plays -11, and then you get the 75-yard scoring drive. That's a good day for the defense.
That's a hell of a day for the defense, and the thing is now, like, their margin of error is gone, and they also have to worry about, for recruiting purposes, for image purposes, like that's a division game they just lost, and I'm not thinking that Indiana is going to finish higher than Penn State, because I'm pretty damn sure that they won't. But I mean, like, Penn State is probably going to go 5-3 now, right? And I don't think I would have said that before this weekend. That's tough.
Yeah. The other positive that I think is worth just acknowledging is that Pat Freiermuth had 10 targets on the day, 7 catches of 60 yards and a touchdown. I thought that was just encouraging to know that, all right, Kirk Ciarrocca is going to try to get their best player involved. Like, he didn't have really a tight end to throw to at Minnesota. Pat Freiermuth wasn't even really like a high volume target last year at Penn State, but it looks like they're going to try to feed him, and I think that's a good thing. But ultimately this is, I agree with you. Like, this is a team that hadn't taken the next step. And as we mentioned already once, they look the third best team in the Big Ten East, and they're fourth best in the standings right now.
So, trying to look something up here real fast. What do we got? Line for this weekend's game against Ohio State, 12 and a half. I don't know what the over-under will be. I mean, like if you call it, let's just call it, 58, right? That implies a score of like, what, kind of 35, 24-ish, roughly.
Yeah.
Are you confident Penn State can put up 24 on Ohio State? Are you confident they can hold Ohio State to 35?
I would be inclined. My early lean this week would be to take Penn State. That's a little bit of blind faith on just like James Franklin has done really good at playing Ohio State close. That's a little bit of fading the obvious Penn State lost to Indiana sort of mentality, and acknowledging that Penn State did actually have a really good game on defense. They do have playmakers that can, create some matchup problems, especially when you got a running quarterback against Ohio State. And so I'm not. There's no sort of misconception here. Like, I guess there's no misconception that Penn State, to me, can win. I don't think that they can, but I think that they've got a defense stout enough to give Ohio State a speed bump. I mean, I really like their secondary. I really like their deep. I mean, hell, I like the whole group. Like, their linebackers are badass as well. So I don't know, man. Like, I think their defense could keep them in it.
And that's without Parsons.
Yeah.
I mean, that's yeah. I tend to agree with you there. I did not play this game in the Buds Bets column.
I was hoping from a Penn State value, I was kind of hoping it would tick up to that 14.
It still might. I mean, this thing opened at like 10 and a half.
Oh, really? Wow.
So it's already 12 and a half. I mean, not a whole lot of value there from 10 to 12. There's not a whole lot of key numbers going on, but still, this could hit 14. It's all at some of the shops that take that are pretty much cater to the really recreational crowd. It's already 13 and climbing. So we could see this tick 14. Here's a question for you. And this is a useful tool for anybody out there who wants to evaluate games. If the result, like the win-loss result of the Penn State game, had reflected how the game was actually played on the field, which would be a Penn State win, and probably like a Penn State, I don't know, 10-point win,
Yeah.
What would this spread be?
The Ohio State spread?
Yeah.
It'd probably be closer to what I think it would be about what it opened at, really. I think, and then I just don't think it would get bet up as much.
I think that's fair. Yeah, I think it'd be 10. I think it'd be 10, right? Because like you'd have 200 feet of teams, you'd have two, top, like or around 10. That's something that like always look at the quality of play, not just the win-loss result. And I think it helps keep a clearer picture of what teams are. Not all wins and losses are created equal. Should we talk Indiana? Because I have one major takeaway from this.
What's that?
Man, they have issues blocking. We spoke in last week's show about how Michael Penix is really good at avoiding pressure, and how I think he was only sacked one time in 160 dropbacks last year. They got him 3 times in this game alone. Like, they have made, and I know Penn State's defense is very good, but man, like, how many passes did he throw in this game? Like, it wasn't like he was dropping back 50 times. They have real issue. 36 passes, 3 sacks. That's fairly high.
Someone posted out in the Twitterverse a rundown of all the throws Michael Penix had on that last drive, and he's getting just smoked. on every throw.
Yeah.
Most of them by Jason Owe. But yeah, like but I tell you that's the thing I do really like about Indiana. And this is consistent every year, it seems like, with Indiana. I guess under Tom Allen. I think that's primarily where I've noticed it. But these dudes, they play hard, and they have, I think, a great energy about them. Like they come into these games, and how many times do they come up like close to pulling these big upsets? And they're always jawing, and they're always confident, and they're always attacking. And this time they just were able to get it done. So it's something I like about Tom Allen teams.
They're kind of like the Kentucky of the Big Ten in some ways. Yep. Now they can throw the ball a little bit better than Kentucky did, although 36 throws for 170 is straight up bad. But man, like they have issues protecting this year, and that extends to the run game as well. I mean, like Stevie Scott, 20 carries, 57 yards. Samson James, 1 carry for 4, so not much going on there. They've got some issues blocking for sure this year. That's concerning.
So quickly on Iowa Purdue, I didn't watch much of it either, but I did dig into the box score, scouted a little bit, and bottom line is Iowa actually looks fully capable of moving the football. I think this is still going to be. I think both these teams are sort of what we expected. Purdue just managed to convert. Iowa had a red zone turnover that was sort of fluky. They had to settle for more field goals than Purdue did. But it seems like Spencer Petras is pretty decent at quarterback. They still got good weapons out there. And Purdue did this one without Rondale Moore. I don't know what's going on there. I hope he's back soon. But for two of the teams that I had a pretty tricky feel for heading into the season, I don't think I have a whole lot better feel for based on the way that game went, with Purdue just sort of edging them out 24-20. I think both are going to be tough outs in the West.
Yeah, I would agree. Like they're not going to contend for the West, but they're not going to be like at the very bottom of the West. I don't think Purdue all or nothing drives. Like literally they had 4 drives that were decent, 66, 75, 73, 71, 75. So it's actually 5 drives. And they had 8 drives, which went for 25 or fewer yards. Like there was no middle ground. Purdue was either like, hey, we're going, we're leaving, we're not coming back, or we're punting quickly or turning it over. Did you see how many targets David Bell had on the day?
No.
I box score scouted this too, so I can't say how they were trying to get him the ball, but it was almost like Jeff Brom. When you leave the babysitter the emergency number, it's like, all right, something happens, call this. It was almost like that piece of paper got cut off, so there was only like one thing on there. He just kept, whoever's calling the plays for them kept hitting that button over and over again because they targeted David Bell 21 times.
Oh, hell yeah.
In this game, 21 times. 13 catches, 121 yards.
Keep it simple, stupid.
21 targets to David Bell. Like that is, man.
Hey, they targeted him when it counted in the end zone, and he converted on a few of those. How many touchdowns do you have? 2?
Yeah, like that. 121 on 21 targets is not even very efficient, but at the same time, he had 3 touchdowns, by the way.
Oh, 3. There you go. So yeah.
Keep it going.
God, I hope Rondale Moore gets back. We all 2020 has been a tough year. We all deserve to see David Bell and Rondale Moore on the field together, same time.
I completely agree. After the ad break, got a mailbag question here, and we're also going to go no huddle with our observations on some other teams that we liked this weekend or teams about whom we've significantly changed our opinion. So see y'all in a second. All right, dude. Let's open up the mailbag here. We get our mailbag questions from the Apple Podcast review section. 5 stars from B Riley 2223. He thinks we're a phenomenal college football pod. I'm going to forward this to our bosses, by the way. Such a great podcast to get your college ball fix. Barton and Bud have a great chemistry and provide a unique perspective on recruiting and how it affects the entire world, from the college football, from the state of the program to week in, week out on-field performances. With the breadth of their knowledge, to try to demonstrate that they're just as comfortable
look at this
talking about Trevor Lawrence as they are about the offensive line at Coastal Carolina. By the way, shout out to Coastal. the Shots getting the win with the backup quarterback this weekend. Love this show. Keep up the great work.
Did you see how the Shots celebrate their wins?
No, I missed it. What happened?
There's in the locker room, they have like someone dressed up as Stone Cold Steve Austin. I don't know if it's like a strength coach or an assistant coach or something, and someone dressed up as the Georgia Southern Eagle mascot. And there's like a whole like WWF routine, and he like pile drives the mascot, and then everyone goes crazy. It's I mean, you have to love the Shots. Like, you just have to. They are America's team.
I'm 36 years old. I absolutely watched wrestling in high school. Like that era was targeted at me. I'm all about that. That is very cool. So he continues here. I'm a cover 3 disciple. That's Barton's other show. Excellent. And my question relates to wide receivers in today's college ball landscape. Is the receiver position becoming the differentiating factor for the elite of the elite teams? As a Notre Dame fan, God, that's why his grammar is so good. He went to private school. As a Notre Dame fan, I noticed that a major reason a lot of analysts don't give us a shot this year is because of the uninspiring performances from the receiver group. Is there a version of the bus driver versus fighter pilot characterization that would translate into receivers? Thanks again, guys, and hope you and your families are doing well. That's a super nice question.
What a polite question. Man. My God, B. Briley, whatever. So I think that, yeah, it's enlightening that he's coming from a Notre Dame perspective. This could kick us. We could sort of fold in the Notre Dame observation this weekend too, because Notre Dame went off on Pitt 45-3. Clark Lee put together a defense that gave up like 120 yards total or something ridiculous. And so I don't know if you feel differently about Notre Dame or not. I feel better about Notre Dame as a team that has continued to lean into its identity this year, that has continued to accept what it is and who it is. Do I think it's more likely to beat Clemson? I think it would take like a perfect game to beat Clemson because they don't have those outside guys. Unfortunately, Kevin Austin looks like he's out for the year. Ben Skowronek, or however you say his name, I should figure that out before the season's over. Made a big play in this one, but I don't know that you can count on him to do it in big games against Clemson types, against Andrew Booth and Darian Kendrick and those freaks out there at corner. So I think the fighter pilot bus driver characterization works here. I think Notre Dame's got some bus drivers at wide receiver. They can go out there and they make the catch. They can move the chains. They can get your kid to school, but they're not going to win any races. The irony is they've Chase Claypool and Miles Boykin, and some of these guys have been freaks, and it never feels like Notre Dame has that guy out there. I don't know what's missing there, because they go to the NFL and
they don't have Ian Book throwing the ball in the NFL.
That's right. Like, I think that's what it is. Like,
he's going to go pro in something other than sports.
They got a bus driver at quarterback and a bus driver at receiver, and that's not really going to cut it, I think.
I think that's fair. Because certainly Clemson does not have they don't have fighter pilots at outside receiver yet this year, but they have like the ultimate fighter pilot quarterback, and so we're not particularly worried about them. As far as Notre Dame, and I think he's on to something here that like all these elite teams, it used to be you would hear the narrative, hey, like this team has a really elite defensive line. Pretty much everybody that gets into the playoffs nowadays has that, right? Ohio State, Clemson, LSU last year had a bunch of dudes on the defensive line who either are playing on Sundays or who will. But the receiver position has become a very important position as the game has become a more vertical game or a more passing-oriented game. I mean, we just talked about David Bell for Purdue having 21 targets. Nobody used to get 21 targets in a game. That's outrageous. But as teams throw the ball more, your impact on the game can be greater. I bet Notre Dame this weekend. I was really excited to do so. I think this is one of those things where, like, if you get paid to watch college football like we do, I was just listening to what Tony Dungy said against Louisville, and he was all hyped up in his pregame about how they were ready to throw the ball down the field. They were feeling good about it. They were ready to come out firing. And then 25-mile-an-hour winds and some pretty poor red zone execution. I think Brian Kelly just said, screw it. We're just going to run the ball and play defense here today and not get beat by Louisville. But I was like, man, Pitt's going to give him a million chances because Pitt can't move the ball for shit. And they're going to give a lot of one-on-one chances down the field to throw the ball to. And then I saw the Kevin Austin news. And I was bummed. I like Kevin Austin, North Broward prep kid down here in Florida. And I was like, that sucks, man. Not only it sucks for him, it sucks for Notre Dame, but it also sucks for the ACC race because now there's only one way Notre Dame can beat Clemson. Like you said, they have to play a perfect game. They also have to play a perfect game in their style and drag Clemson down into playing that style. If Clemson's receivers are legit and they're rolling by the time they play Notre Dame, Clemson doesn't have to acquiesce to that. They can say, no, we're going to play our game. And our game is where we score about high 30s on you. And good luck beating us with your point total in the low to mid 20s. That Kevin Austin news had me really bummed on Saturday morning because I was so excited about him getting back, and then they say he re-injured his foot and he's probably done for the year.
I think to the broader point, I do think that fighter pilot wide receivers have become a necessity to win a national championship. I don't think we have seen or are going to see someone win a national championship with a really good running back, an offensive line, and a bunch of average Joes at wide receiver. I don't think that has that happened. I don't think it has, right?
And all right, let's go down the list. LSU
years.
Last year's check.
Right.
The year before was who? Bama?
Clemson, right? I don't know. Was it Clemson?
Wait.
I'm bad at this stuff. I'm bad at remembering years.
It went it was Clemson. That's right. Year before that was Bama. So Clemson's a clear check. Bama that year, did they still have Ridley on that team?
Bama has dudes on the outside. They've had dudes on the outside every year in the last several. The national championship year was the year they threw it to Devontae Smith to win the game.
Right. That was 3 true freshmen. They had some dudes on that team who were emerging. I'm just trying to remember if they had
Judy was true freshman still. Yeah.
Judy Ruggs and Devontae would have been true freshmen. Waddle's not on that team yet. Was Calvin Ridley on that team?
Probably.
He might have been. So in case, check. The Clemson team prior, like obvious check. Who else? Prior to that, was that another Bama year? Did Bama? Yeah, Bama. The Bama team with Jacob Coker had.
That would have been. I mean, that was O.J. Howard and Calvin Ridley.
Yeah.
And Richard Mullaney.
Okay, so 2 of the 3, I would say for sure are no doubt NFL dudes.
Calvin Ridley's a first rounder, so like that's a check.
The 2014 Ohio State team has a ton of dudes. That's like Devin Smith, Michael Thomas, another guy who got drafted in like the second round by the Jets. I remember I saw for a research project I was doing the other day. So it's been a while for you to be able to win a national title without some serious dudes at the receiver position.
Florida State, Rashad Green, Kelvin Benjamin.
Yeah. That's actually a pretty weak class, all things considered.
Mm-hmm.
They had every single starter on that team got drafted, but I think one. So that's helpful if you can do that and you have the Heisman winner.
Yeah. I mean, we're down to 2013, Amari Cooper, 2012. 2012, Bama, this might be the first one where we can scratch off the list. Their receivers were Darius Hanks, Marquise Mays, Brad Smelly. There you go.
This is the 2011 team that beats LSU in the rematch.
Yeah. So 2012. That's the last time a non-fighter pilot wide receiver core won the national championship.
And they scored
21 points. That was before the offensive revolution had happened.
So do you want to just go there with Bama now? Like, because Waddle's out for the year, and that sucks, like, as a college football fan, man, because he's like the most exciting player in all of college football. But also, what's the one fear that Georgia had this summer, when we were talking to guys from the Georgia site? What do they tell us? We don't know if we have somebody that can cover Jalen Waddle in the slot. And we've said this line in the podcast 3-4 times. Yeah, welcome to the rest of college football. In a rematch now, this is different. This is different because John Mechie's now your 2. John Mechie's the 2 is not the same thing as John Mechie as the 3.
Yeah, and they've got Slade Bolden trying to step into that slot position. He had a nice little game against Tennessee, but that's not. I don't think Slade Bolden is somebody that Georgia feels like they're going to have trouble covering in the same way that that Jalen Waddle would challenge them. So, look, Alabama has the same ceiling. Nothing's changed. I just think that particularly that matchup against Georgia, that totally changes the perspective on that game and gives you a little bit more of an inkling to sort of take a flyer on the Bulldogs.
It absolutely does. And it also it makes Clemson's receiver room look a little bit better in comparison to Alabama. So I'm still kind of waiting for Clemson's outside guys to emerge. I'm starting to have some questions about the Clemson team. I think we'll get into that more on the next show, so we don't do an hour and a half tonight. All right, I'm going to give your team some love here. Oklahoma State, man, came out, and Iowa State was a sexy upset pick this weekend. A lot of people had Iowa State. Oklahoma State was the clearly better team in this game. Iowa State, I think they had like one big play on a bust and a defensive score. Okie State, first game back for Spencer Sanders, looks really strong. Their run game looks okay. Spencer Sanders moving around fairly well. Defense, for the most part, is pretty suffocating. Like, do I think Oklahoma State would get smoked in a playoff game? Yeah, but you have to entertain the idea that they can get there now. And like, I don't think it's crazy to think that they could get there. They're probably still underdogs at Oklahoma in 3 weeks, but if they can win that, I mean, it's possible.
I tell you, there's a big one this week. So I think they have Texas this weekend, right?
Yeah.
So
am I missing something here? Because I bet them against Texas. Like, I trust Mike Gundy over Tom Herman at this point in this Texas team. I think we're getting some
what
false.
Was that line?
I got it at 2.5 or 3.
I assume Oklahoma State's the favorite there.
Yeah, I went ahead and laid it. I think we're getting some false read on Texas because I don't think people understand how bad Baylor's offense is yet. Baylor's offense is absolutely a train wreck.
Yeah, I like that. I like that play. Though, but if they beat Texas, I guess they still got Kansas State out there. That like they're still chugging along. But if they beat Texas, then considering they already have that Iowa State win behind them, they're cruising to the Big 12 championship game. So agreed. I like Oklahoma State, obviously. I'm going to go like the ones that were really striking to me were, one, there's been a lot of reason to start throwing dirt on LSU's grave over the last couple of weeks. And I am not going to deny that I had some serious reservations and doubts about this team just being able to pull it all together. Look, I mean, we've talked about LSU a lot. Obviously, I don't think we had the wrong take beginning of the year that this is a team that's going to be, what did we say, closer to 4-6 than 8-2. That's still in play. But I'm sitting here looking at the way they've responded defensively against South Carolina, and in particular the way they continue to chug along offensively, even with TJ Finley, the true freshman there at quarterback, who exceeded my expectations for him out of the gate. I think that I could have expected that to be what he looked like next year, but as a true freshman week one, I thought that was really impressive. And their offense just keeps on plugging, and it just feels like they're playing loose. They're playing excited. That game to me was huge for LSU. It feels like it gave them some mojo back. And then I'll say this, I'll handcuff it with this one. I think that Missouri, now I didn't watch any of the Missouri-Kentucky game, but I did look at the box score. And I looked at Missouri running like 96 plays to Kentucky's 36 or something ridiculous, and holding Kentucky to nothing on offense and possessing the football like 50 minutes of the 60-minute game. And it makes me think, you know what, maybe, and I've thought Kentucky was a pretty decent team, and they just got done walloping Tennessee. It makes me think Missouri's might be pretty decent. I mean, they are pretty decent. I don't think that's a think now. I think we gotta acknowledge that. And so props to Eli Drinkwitz. I mean, that's an impressive jump start to his SEC tenure.
So I can't get there fully yet on LSU, but it was certainly a step in the right direction. I actually saw TJ Finley like back-to-back weekends play 7-on, and like size-wise, being from playing for LSU in that jersey, you're going to get the Jamarcus Russell comparison, obviously, and he does have a big arm. There's no doubt about it. I was actually really impressed by his like touch and ability to put the right amount of arc on the ball and hit guys in stride in playing 7-on, because you're playing 7-on, like it's not that important that you throw a million miles an hour. Like you got a lot less traffic around you. You're able to hit guys in stride, and he was. I was pretty impressed. Like, okay, like this guy's not just physical tools. Like he has some idea what he's doing. But his high school numbers were not great, And so my thought became, I wonder if he's one of these guys who's just much better at 7-on than he is in like with pads on, when you have traffic around your feet, when you have rushers, all that kind of stuff. But he was very good, I thought, against South Carolina. Now, I am not convinced that LSU's defense is fixed. This is a classic Will Muschamp game, just with more offense being cranked up. But you have, ripping off big chunk plays. Look at these chunk plays for South Carolina. Runs of 49, 21, 19, 45, passes 36, 44, 17, 57, and 32 yards. And yet somehow they only scored 24 points because Will Muschamp is a terrible in-game head coach. His field goal decisions are atrocious. He still coaches like he's a defensive coordinator, and his teams have the propensity to commit just absolutely insane penalties and turnovers at the wrong time. Like that's how you go 7.9 yards a play against LSU and only score 24 points. I don't think LSU's defense is fixed as much as just kind of South Carolina stopped itself. And there are some teams that won't stop themselves against LSU's defense if LSU does not get this thing fixed.
What's your early take on the Auburn game? I mean, where did you play that one early line?
No, I want to bet Auburn, but I want to get like 3 or 3.5. But I don't know if it'll get there. And now Auburn has another offensive lineman out for the year. I saw our Auburn site, our Auburn 24/7 site reported. So that's Brandon Council, who I believe was one of their transfers in, right? He was a grad transfer from Akron. He was their starting right guard first 2 games, and most recent 2 as well. Played some left guard. He started at right tackle against Arkansas when Brett Ayers' hand was coming back. So he had a severe knee injury against Ole Miss, so he's out. Auburn offensive line was a major question for them, so that kind of scares me a little bit there. I'm probably going to wait and do more digging before I play anything on this game, just because of that.
I mean, those are 2 teams I don't trust. I think LSU's getting its mojo back, but like I don't trust Auburn to go. And I mean, I also love here. I love this principle is when a true freshman comes in and has a really good game, especially at quarterback, there's going to be a little bit of an overreaction, because first game, I can tell you as a person that had one of the best games of my college football career in my first start as a true freshman, it was like you have no, like, if you have the right mentality, all you're doing is just like surviving and just reacting. Like you don't have time to think about anything. And then once that second game, I could tell you like the second start of my career, the first start of my career was one of the best games of my career. I was like league defensive player of the week. Second game, I was backpedaling like out of the screen in the film session, just because I knew like what to fear at that point. Like before, I was too stupid to know. I was just like out there just playing. I think that second starts is something to fade, particularly when we're talking about like true freshman quarterbacks. So again, that would be a spot I would be eyeing to fade LSU, if not for like my lack of trust in Auburn. And there is a good bit of that.
Speaking of eyeing, I was told all week on Twitter by South Carolina fans that Auburn ran for all those yards against South Carolina because South Carolina was playing prevent defense, despite the fact that they only had like a 10-point lead with about a whole quarter to go. Apparently, South Carolina was playing prevent. They must have been playing prevent from the start in this one, Barton, because LSU ran for 276.
The LSU did whatever they wanted, it seemed like, on offense.
South Carolina, disturbing lack of tackles for loss in recent games. That defensive line has not replaced. Is it Kinlaw? I'm trying to think the stud they had last year.
Yeah, Javon Kinlaw. I don't understand why Bill Muschamp, I don't know. I don't understand why he hadn't been able to produce a dominant defense in South Carolina. They're always just good enough to where you can trick yourself into thinking that they're a good defense. And then and as soon as you're convinced that they're a good defense, they have a bad game. I feel like you should be able to have a really good defense in South Carolina. I don't think there's anything precluding you from that. Like that's achievable, but it doesn't seem like it's hit.
And certainly some of the ones that he's had, which are better, have occasionally been a little bit clouded by the fact that like some of those offenses he's had have just been horrendous, and they turned the ball over at like their own 10 routinely, and then all of a sudden it's like, damn, they gave up 31 points on 280 yards. Like how do they pull that off? You got any other takeaways for the weekend we need to get here in the no huddle session?
I mean, nothing that's just like absolutely, totally like dominating my brain right now. Like that, I think I'm pretty much cashed on the weekend, and as far as the things that I really learned.
All right, I got one more.
All right.
I thought Virginia Tech was turning the corner. I was all about some B Tech, and they put up a really good fight against North Carolina, despite the fact they had all their secondary out with COVID stuff. This weekend, they get a lot of those guys back. They lose to Wake Forest. After what Fuente pulled this offseason with the Baylor job, and that's just not a good look. That is not a good look.
Ooh.
Like we talked about this coaching carousel stuff, and I'm not going to pretend like I have inside information there as far as funding, VTech has, or if they would do something in a COVID year. But like, man, they lost to Wake Forest. Now they got to go on the road and play Louisville. They get Liberty, Miami at Pitt. They still have Clemson on this schedule. I feel like I'm a believer in his team, but you can't be losing to Wake Forest.
Yeah, but don't underestimate Wake. Like Wake is always a sneaky game,
and they've improved. That's fair.
They have. So I hear you. I get it, but I do think Wake is. You got it. Like it's not like Vandy or Old Duke or Old Wake. I think this is still New Wake. New Wake's respectable.
No, they've improved a lot. Like during this season, I mean they were not very good to start the year. Now they're a lot better than they were. I don't know, a lot of blowouts in the ACC yesterday.
Yeah, I mean Virginia Tech is absolutely the hardest team to figure out in college football this year. I think to this point. How do you bet that team?
Not successfully. At least not for me so far. Also, God, NC State misses Devin Leary.
It sucks. It sucks for them.
Yeah.
That was offense that was starting to find something.
Yeah, this weekend that was tough for them. I'm cashed, man.
Yeah, that's. I mean, I feel like we got a pretty good. I mean, there's some picks to knit out there, but I feel like we've got a pretty good stretch to the show. We'll save a few more thoughts for the midweek show, but you know what? Things march on. When we got one more weekend until the Pac-12 joins?
This weekend they're not joining. Next weekend they are back. We get a little more Mountain West this weekend. Mountain West was fun last night. That was some wild stuff. So I'm excited a little more late night Mountain West stuff. They get the spotlight all to themselves once again, and then we'll talk a little Pac-12 next week.
All right, that's all for me, man. That's all I got.
5 stars on iTunes.
Thanks, y'all.